Hello, Psych 101 students. Welcome to Learning Objective 5. We're going to look at how the hemispheres work together, and we will also look at how your brain communicates with your body. Let's begin. So I already mentioned the split brain situation in the last video. The corpus callosum is surgically severed, so it's cut right down the middle, and then the two hemispheres of the brain cannot communicate back and forth with one another. They performed the surgery for severe epilepsy as a last ditch cure. Um, it is no longer performed today. We've come up with newer methods to treat severe epilepsy, but for a number of years it was performed, and the first split brain procedure was actually done in Rochester, New York. So I mentioned this last video, and let me go on here. I also talked about this last video that the two hemispheres, we've figured out the two hemispheres that they perform different functions, I guess. And this is known as lateralization, that the left hemisphere does some things differently than the right hemisphere. I talked about all this last video, but I'll review it here. The left hemisphere is responsible for logical thoughts and language. Remember the memory aid, LLL, left, logic, language. The left hemisphere of your brain controls the movements from the right side of your body, and it processes images from the right visual field. The right hemisphere is responsible for spatial relationships, controls movements on the left side of the body, and it processes images from the left vision field. Let's go on here. This is just a little picture showing the how the brain where the information goes in the brain from the left versus right visual field. You can see that there's a crossover. So if I'm staring right in the middle of this orange and blue thing here, all the orange stuff would be to the left. You can see that it ends up going to the right hemisphere of the brain. It gets processed at the back of the brain in the visual cortex. So everything from the right visual field crosses over and gets processed in the left hemisphere visual cortex. And once again, the left hemisphere is better with language and controls the right side body movements. The right hemisphere is better with spatial relationships and controls the left side body movements. Okay, so this is all kind of review. I mentioned all this last video. So in a split brain patient, once again, they cut through the corpus callosum, and so the hemispheres are separated, and information cannot be transferred from one hemisphere to the other. Let's look, though, at a typical study. I didn't get into this in the last video. How did we study split brain patients? Well, one of the main researchers is the most prominent researcher of split brain patients. His name was Gazzaniga, sorry. And he did experiments with split brain patients. As it says here, he found that when a patient is asked to name an object touched by the left hand, the patient is aware of the object touched, but incapable of verbalizing the object because right and left hemispheres cannot communicate with each other. Remember, for a typical person, the language center is mainly located in the left hemisphere. If I'm holding something in my left hand, then, or touching something with my left hand, that information goes to the right hemisphere. where I don't have my primary language functions. So I wouldn't be able to say what I'm touching or holding. Um, let's This was at least one main finding. Let's look at the one of the typical setups for an experiment done with split brain patients, and we'll see. There's been different types of studies, but this was a fairly typical kind of setup. So I'm going to zoom in here and go through this. So you can see that this is a split brain patient, and they are told to focus on the center of the screen. You can see that black dot on the screen there. And then they quickly flash images, an image on the left, to the left and to the right of the center dot. And these pictures get flashed fairly quickly, so the split brain subject doesn't have time to kind of just scan their eyes left and right. So what happens is, okay, well, actually, let me go through what it says here. So a split brain patient watches as different images flash simultaneously on the left and the right sides of a screen. Remember, the visual information is going to cross over. So this picture of a snowy house with a snowman, it's in the left visual field. It ends up going to the right hemisphere of the brain. This picture of a chicken claw is in the right visual field. It goes to the left hemisphere of the brain. And then, as it says here, below the screen is a row of other images. The patient is asked to point each hand at an image most related to the image flashed on that side of the screen. So the right hemisphere got the information of the snowy house with the snowman. Remember, the right hemisphere controls the left hand, so he uses his left hand to point to the shovel. The left hemisphere got the image of the chicken claw, so it controls the right hand, so his right hand points to the chicken. As it says here, the left hemisphere lets the right hand point at a picture of a chicken head. The right hemisphere lets the left hand point at a picture of a snow shovel. Now, this is kind of the interesting part. Well, one of the interesting parts. Okay. When the brain patient is asked to explain these selections, the left hemisphere can provide the answers verbally. But remember, the right hemisphere doesn't control language. So to explain the right hand selection of the chicken head, the left hemisphere lets the participant say, "Oh, the chicken claw goes with the chicken head." It's just like, you know, if you saw the chicken claw, you would point to the chicken head. So the left hemisphere has language. It controlled the right hand. It got the picture of the chicken claw. To explain the left hand selection of the shovel, though, the left hemisphere must interpret because it does not see the snow scene. So the left hemisphere is the one talking to us. But it's only the right hemisphere that saw this picture of the snow scene. So the left hemisphere ends up interpreting that the shovel is used to clean up after chickens, and this is what he says to you. So the left hemisphere is unaware of why um, of why the left hand is pointing to the snow shovel. It doesn't have that information, and it doesn't have the picture of the snowy house. So he looks down, he sees he's pointing at shovel. The left side of the brain that has language. He says, so he has to just make up something of why he chose that. And what he saw was a chicken claw, so he thinks, oh, this shovel must be related to what I saw with my left half of the brain. Um, let's say in another study or another test, let's say we blindfolded a split brain patient and we place some familiar object in their left hand. I don't know, maybe something like I don't know, an orange. You know, if you were blindfolded and felt an orange in your hand and could feel the bumps on it, you might have a good guess of what it is. But the blindfolded split brain patient cannot name the object, as you may realize by now, because it's in his left hand. The right side of his brain knows what it's holding, but the left side is the side that talks. So he's blindfolded, he's got an object, he has no idea what he's holding. At least the part that talks to you, he would just say, I don't know what it is, or he'd make up something. But let's say we take the object of his left hand and say, well, can you draw it? Well, using his left hand, he'll be able to draw the object. He would draw a picture of an orange because the right side of the the brain knows what he was holding, and so the left hand would be able to draw it. The right hand wouldn't be able to draw it, but the left hand would. So it's very much almost like split brain patients have two separate minds, and that can know different things, at least in these experiments. But I'll tell you that what the research actually showed was that for the most part, these split brain patients, they felt the same after the operation. They acted the same as they did before, and they basically felt like they thought the same. That they were thinking the same as before. Um, and this is because, like, in reality, you're not staring at one point on a screen. Like, if this was real life, all you'd have to do is, and there was a couple of objects, he'd probably shift his eyes left and right. And that way, both pictures would end up on both sides of the brain. All he has to do is, like, shift a little bit to the left of that dot, a little bit to the right, and this is what split brain patients, I think, what they learn to do is, they continually scan their environment, and so information's not just entering half the brain. It only happens in this, like, controlled situation, and typically you're not going to be blindfolded or anything. So it turns out that they live pretty normally afterwards. There would be some small little differences. And I did, I'll tell you, I did hear a story that one split brain patient had to kind of tie down one of their hands when they drove a car because because the two hands would sometimes want to go in different directions because the two halves of the brains wanted to go different places. So, like, it was almost like his hands would end up arguing on the steering wheel. So yeah, I heard that one split brain patient had to restrain one of their hands when they drove. Okay. Anyways, so that is split brain patients. The left brain, right brain myth, and you may have heard this. It's been around. The myth is that the left brain thinkers are more rational, analytical, and objective. It's like, somebody that's really logical, or let's say really good at math. You say, oh, you're left brain dominant because you're good at math and logic. And somebody that's very artistic, we would say, people would say, oh, they're a right brain thinker, or they're right brain dominant because they're very creative and they're artistic. Um, and this myth has been around for a long time, but the scientific evidence has shown that although the hemispheres are specialized for certain functions, each hemisphere is capable of carrying out most cognitive processes, though sometimes in different ways. We've used new techniques with our brain imaging technology, like fMRI scans and whatnot, and to look at, whether people are using one side of the brain much more than the other. And this technology hasn't found any evidence of right or left dominance, right or left hemisphere dominance. People always are using both sides of their brain, even though there's differences between people. Sure, some people are more logical, or more mathematical, and some other people are more artistic or creative. But that doesn't mean that they're using that half of the brain much more. Um, just as an example, I mean, math it turns out that math is actually very creative. In addition to being logical, when you perform math, you're also being creative in ways to figure out how to do a problem. So you're using both sides of a problem when you do a math problem. Similarly, people that are artistic, uh, it doesn't just require like um, being emotional and creative. A lot of artistic creativity often requires very rigorous, precise thought. I mean, and so great sculptor or painter, they're also relying on the left side of their brain, the logical part, and just as much as the right side of the brain. So the evidence shows that we're always using both halves of the brain, and we know that the left and the right sides do sometimes specialize in different things, but no one uses one side more than the other. The messages pass back and forth. Both sides are generally active throughout the day. And just in case you heard another myth about only using 10% of your brain, that's hogwash as well. What scanning technology shows us is that we use all the parts. We use 100% of our brain. Okay? If there were parts we weren't using, they would have been what's the I'm trying to think of the term, but they would have disappeared by now. Like during development, we reach a stage in development in late childhood and during adolescence where we do pruning within the brain. It's kind of like when let's say you have a hedge or something like you might prune off some of the branches that aren't growing well or that are a little bit that are dying, and this makes the rest of the hedge healthier. Well, we do that during development. If there's parts of our brain that we aren't using, they disappear. I mean, they get pruned away. Those connections, um, and uh, and our brains retain only the connections that are important to us. So we use all of our brains. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so that's the first part of learning objective 5. Split brain patients and left versus right brain, and left versus right hemispheres, I should say. The second part is about the peripheral nervous system. So remember, just as review, we talked about the central nervous system before, which was the brain and the spinal cord. We went through a whole bunch of different brain areas and talked about the spinal cord. Now we're coming to the second part of our nervous system, which is known as the peripheral nervous system. It's the part of our nervous system that extends outside of the central nervous system. It's like all the rest of our nervous system um, that goes throughout our body. It has two major subsystems listed here: the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Let's take a look at each of these parts of the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the first division of the peripheral nervous system is the somatic nervous system. Um, this nervous system, well, we use the system basically to move and to receive sensory information from our skin and our muscles and our joints. Um, and that's really all you have to know about the somatic nervous system. Um, it's the body system for movement and and for moving all of our voluntary muscles, and for receiving information from those muscles and from our joints and from our skin. So information travels to the brain, sensory information from your muscles and joints and skin. And whenever you want to move, you send information from the brain down to your muscles and your joints, and you move them the way you want. And that's all you need to know. Somatic nervous system. It is a system that connects our body to our brain. The second division of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic nervous system. It controls the involuntary actions of internal organs and glands. So things like it controls, your heart, your lungs, your stomach, you know, things that you don't have to think about consciously controlling, which is nice. Imagine if you had to keep thinking, okay, beat heart, beat heart, beat heart. Yeah, imagine you have to keep thinking like to make your heart beat. I mean, obviously you don't. Or you don't have to keep thinking to make your lungs breathe. So these are involuntary actions, or involuntary actions is a good word. Now it's called the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means autonomous, which is autonomous is like independent operation. It they this system operates independently of your conscious thought. You don't have to think about it. It's what else sounds like autonomic or autonomous? Well, the word automatic, right? And that's which is a good memory aid because it is your automatic system. So all of these are related words: autonomic, autonomous, automatic. It's all outside of conscious control. You don't have to tell your stomach when to digest or your heart when to beat. Okay. This autonomic nervous system also has two parts: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. Let's take a look at each of these to finish up this learning objective. And we'll use this diagram here. So we'll start with the sympathetic division, which is listed on the left side of this diagram. It gets engaged during a crisis situation. What we often refer to as a fight or flight situation. There's I don't know, let's say you're on safari and all of a sudden there's a lion rushing at you, or you're in the woods and there's a bear approaching. I mean, that would be, that would be a severe fight or flight situation. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to outrun it? Are you going to climb a tree? Are you going to fight it? I mean, so when we're in these crisis situations, our body responds in a certain way to give us as much energy as possible to fight or to run or to take some other action. This is what the sympathetic nervous system is for. So the sympathetic, as it says at the top of the screen here, top of the left side, the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system prepares the body for action. You're in a crisis situation, it gets you ready to face it. There are a number of changes that automatically take place. Your pupils dilate, your respiration increases, start breathing faster, your heart rate increases, so you get more blood flow throughout the body and the brain. Your digestion decreases. I don't need to be digesting food, putting energy into digesting food when I'm about to run or fight something. There's a few more I'll mention. When your digestion decreases, it'll often cause you to have dry mouth because your saliva is kind of the first step of your digestion system. And so once your digestion system starts to shut down or decrease functioning, your saliva starts to dry up, and this is why you get dry mouth. You'll get an increase of adrenaline, gives you more energy. You will sweat. You'll get goosebumps often. Your hair might stand on end. And in a severe situation, your bladder might relax. In really scary situations, people. This is why people might pee themselves. Is it actually takes energy to hold the pee in? We go all day long holding pee in. It's drawing energy from our body. So when I want as much energy as possible, in a severe situation, I'll relax my bladder and 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 actually, make perhaps pee myself. Excuse me. Okay. Um, so that's the sympathetic nervous system. It is trying to free up as much energy as possible, make you as strong as possible. You get the extra blood flow. You get the breathing helps. You turn off things that you don't need, like relaxing your bladder or stopping your digestion. Your hair standing on end. That's kind of left over from when we were more hairy creatures at one time in evolution, and an animal looks like more scary when their hair stands on end. It makes them look bigger. It's not, you don't really notice it so much on humans with like, the stubby little hair we have on our arms and legs and whatnot, but it still happens. Okay. The the parasympathetic division over here on the right of the autonomic nervous system returns the body to a resting state. Basically, it does all of the opposites of the sympathetic division. So, you can see here, instead of dilating, your pupils contract back to normal, your respiration decreases back to normal, to a resting state, your heart rate decreases when you relax, your digestion increases. It's a good time to digest food, etc. So one of them gets us ready for 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 a crisis situation. The sympathetic system, the parasympathetic system relaxes us. So when they're opposites, so when one is activated, the other system is inactive. Think of a seesaw. Like if one side's up, the other side's down. And if the first side's down, the second side's up. So, and that's basically how these two systems work. And you will that seesaw is going to move up and down during the day, depending on what's happening. You know whether whether you're in a nervous situation or not, or are compared to being at home watching TV or something, laying on the couch, like it, because this, this system, this sympathetic system that prepares us for energy, it's not just for the extreme cases like a bear or a lion, or you're fighting somebody, or it is like just even when you're nervous. If you get a little nervous, you'll get some sympathetic activity. It won't be everything. Like you don't go around peeing yourself all the time and things like that, but let's say you're giving a presentation in front of a class and you're not, something you're not good at. A lot of students get nervous. I was horrible at it. I was so shy when I was younger that I could not stand getting up and talking in front of people. And anyways, I still show signs of it even after all these years of teaching. I still show sympathetic activity when I get up to teach, especially like the first day. I can feel it. I'm a little nervous, and I sweat a lot in class, and sometimes I get a little bit dry mouth. I always have a bottle of water with me, and you might experience that. Like you get up to give a talk, and all of a sudden it's like your digestion has slowed down, and so you don't have as much saliva, and you feel yourself sweating a little bit, and so, little things like that, or going on a date is another example. If you go on a date and you're kind of nervous about it, don't be surprised. A lot of people will start to sweat a little bit, and then once again, you might get dry mouth. Those are a couple of the common things, but probably your heart rate's going to go a little faster too. You might not notice it. You might breathe a little quicker. Um, so it happens even just with a little nervousness. And so there's different levels. It's not all or nothing. It's not like you go through all the changes in every time you go into the sympathetic, division. It's not like everything happens. It's like you might be running late in traffic and you're worried about getting to work on time, and you probably get a little bit of sympathetic system activation, even though like you're not about to fight or run, but you're just nervous. or if you're anxious, you get more activity from the sympathetic system. The parasympathetic system, it's going to be most active when you're really relaxed. Like I said, laying on a couch, reading a book, something like that. Like it's, anyways. That's enough examples. One memory aid, just to finish up here, to keep these two straight. Sympathetic starts with S. Stress starts with S. It is our stress system. When we're under stress, our sympathetic nervous system is active. So that's the S1, sympathetic and stress. Parasympathetic, this one's not as good. Uh, it has an R. Okay, third letter has an R. And R starts for rest, relaxation, and restoring resources. So parasympathetic, look for the R. Rest, relaxation, restoring resources. Sympathetic system, under stress. S. And that'll conclude learning objective 5.